Hi, Reddit. I'm Lisa, 26, and I have to share this roller coaster of a story about my engagement party that spiraled into something I still can't fully wrap my head around. Buckle up because this is going to be a wild ride. It all started when my fiancé, Eric, and I decided to host a small engagement party at my parents' house in Portland. We wanted something intimate, just close family and friends, with a relaxed vibe. Think fairy lights in the backyard, soft music, and lots of good food. I'd been dreaming about this for weeks. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that nothing ever goes as planned when my future mother-in-law, Barbara, is involved. Barbara has always been a bit intense. She has a way of making everything about herself, and despite my best efforts to set boundaries, she's always managed to bulldoze through them. Eric and I had a long talk before the party, and he promised he'd keep her in check. "This is our day," he said, "not hers." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I had my doubts. The day of the party started beautifully. My mom and I spent the morning setting up the backyard with twinkling lights, floral arrangements, and a table full of homemade appetizers. The weather was perfect, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to relax. Guests began arriving, and the atmosphere was exactly what I'd hoped for. Warm, loving, and full of laughter. And then Barbara showed up. She arrived late, of course, in a car that wasn't hers. Later, I found out she had rented a limo for the occasion. A limo for a backyard engagement party. She stepped out in a sequined gold dress that screamed, "Look at me," and immediately started commanding attention. Her first words weren't congratulations or even a hello. No! She waltzed in, surveyed the setup, and loudly announced, "Oh, I was worried it would look cheap, but this isn't bad." My jaw clenched, but I managed to force a smile. Eric shot me an apologetic look from across the yard and quickly made his way over to her. I thought he'd handle it, but before I knew it, she was standing by the food table, rearranging everything. "These plates don't match the theme," she said, swapping out the ones I'd chosen for some she had apparently brought with her. "Who does that?" It didn't stop there. Barbara had brought her own music playlist, complete with a portable speaker, and started blasting it over the soft acoustic tunes we'd picked. When my mom gently pointed out that we already had music, Barbara waved her off with a laugh. "Oh, but this is more festive. Everyone loves a little Sinatra, right?" As if that wasn't enough, she'd also taken it upon herself to invite a few of her friends, people I'd never met, who arrived and immediately made themselves at home. One of them even brought a dog, which promptly knocked over one of the floral arrangements. By this point, my blood was boiling, but I didn't want to cause a scene. This was supposed to be a happy day, and I kept telling myself to let it go. But then came the toast. My dad had prepared a heartfelt speech about how much he loved Eric and me and how excited he was for our future together. It was emotional and beautiful, and I was on the verge of tears. As he finished, and everyone raised their glasses, Barbara clinked her glass loudly and stood up. "I'd like to say a few words," she announced, cutting my dad off before anyone could even sit down. I shot Eric a look, but he was already on his feet, trying to stop her. "Mom, maybe we should let Lisa's dad finish," he said, his voice calm but firm. But Barbara was having none of it. "Oh, it's fine," she said, brushing him off. "This is a big moment for me too, you know." And then she launched into a 10-minute monologue about how she'd always dreamed of this day, how she was so proud of Eric, and how she'd already started planning the wedding. She even threw in a few not-so-subtle jabs about how she hoped the wedding wouldn't be too casual because, as she put it, this family of standards. By the time she finished, the mood was completely ruined. Guests were awkwardly sipping their drinks, unsure of what to do. My dad looked furious. My mom was trying not to cry, and I was just done. Eric pulled her aside and tried to talk to her, but she brushed him off with a laugh. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," she said. "It's all in good fun." After the toast debacle, I decided I needed a moment to myself. I slipped inside the house, hoping for a few minutes of peace, but Barbara wasn't done yet. She followed me in, cornering me in the kitchen. "Lisa, dear, I hope you're not upset," she said, her tone dripping with faux concern. "I know how stressful these things can be for someone who's not used to hosting big events." I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. "I think the party's going fine, Barbara," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing some great secret. "You know, if you need help planning the wedding, I'd be happy to take over. I have so many ideas, and I'm sure it'll be a lot easier for you if someone more experienced handles it." That was it, the final straw. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure, and said, "Barbara, I appreciate the offer, but Eric and I have it under control. This is our wedding, and we'll plan it our way." Her smile faltered for a moment before she recovered, patting my arm like I was a child. "Of course, dear, but just remember, weddings are about family, not just a couple." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me fuming in the kitchen. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, anything to release the frustration that had been building all day. But instead, I straightened my dress, plastered on a fake smile, and went back outside. The rest of the evening was a blur. Barbara continued to dominate conversations. Her friends overstayed their welcome, and by the time the last guest left, I was completely drained. Eric tried to apologize, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. He knew his mother had crossed a line, but he didn't know how to fix it. As we cleaned up, my mom pulled me aside and said, "Lisa, you need to set boundaries with her. If you don't, this is only going to get worse." She was right, of course, but the thought of confronting Barbara felt impossible. She wasn't the kind of person who listened to reason. That night, as I lay in bed, replaying the day's events in my head, I realized something had to change. Barbara wasn't going to stop, and if I didn't stand up for myself, she'd steamroll over every important moment in my life. The wedding, the future, everything. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her ruin anything else. The morning after the engagement party, I woke up to my phone vibrating like crazy. Barbara had already left me 8 missed calls and countless texts. Each message was worse than the last. "Lisa, I feel like you don't appreciate my efforts," read one. "This is a family event, and I deserve to be involved," followed another. And the cherry on top, "Eric's changed so much since he met you. Don't ruin his relationship with his family." My stomach churned as I read them. It wasn't just the manipulation. It was the audacity. I slammed my phone onto the table as Eric walked into the kitchen. "Let me guess," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "My mom? You think—" I shot back. "She's out of control, Eric. She didn't just ruin the party. She made the entire night about herself. And now this." I held up my phone. Eric sighed heavily. "I'll talk to her," he said, grabbing his phone. "No," I stopped him. "Talking isn't working. She's not getting it. We need to do something more drastic." Eric hesitated, but then nodded. "You're right. She crossed the line, and it's not the first time." By the afternoon, we decided to set firm boundaries. No more unannounced visits, no more interference in wedding planning, and absolutely no more taking over events. Eric called Barbara to lay it all out. When she picked up, her voice was syrupy sweet. "Oh, Eric, I'm so glad you called. I want to check in about the floral arrangements for the wedding." "Mom!" "Stop," Eric interrupted. "We need to talk about the engagement party." There was a long pause. "What about it?" she asked, her tone icy now. "You ruined it," he said bluntly. "Lisa and I had everything planned, and you hijacked the whole thing. It was disrespectful, and it hurt both of us." Barbara gasped like he'd accused her of a crime. "I was just trying to help. Do you know how much I did to make that party a success? And this is the thanks I get." "It wasn't your party to take over," Eric shot back. "And this is exactly why we're setting boundaries. You're not going to be involved in the wedding planning unless you respect our decisions. The line went silent for a moment before Barbara exploded. Boundaries? Are you serious, Eric? I'm your mother. I have a right to be part of this. Lisa's just turning you against me. I could hear the venom in her voice even through the phone. Eric stayed calm, but his tone was firm. No, Mom. Lisa isn't turning me against you. You're doing that all on your own. If you can't respect us, you won't be part of this at all. Barbara hung up on him. For a few days, it seemed like she'd finally gotten the message. She didn't call or text, and Eric and I actually started to feel hopeful. Maybe she backed off. We were wrong. The peace lasted exactly a week before Barbara struck again. She showed up at our house unannounced again. This time, she came armed with a binder full of wedding plans she made on her own. I've taken care of everything, she announced as she barged into the living room. The guest list, the seating chart, even the menu. You'll thank me later. I stared at her in disbelief. Barbara, what are you doing here? We didn't invite you. Oh, don't be silly, Lisa. This is my son's wedding too. I know you've been overwhelmed, so I thought I'd step in and help. Help. I snapped. We already told you to stop interfering. Eric stepped in, trying to calm things down. Mom, we talked about this. You're crossing boundaries again. Barbara looked genuinely offended. Boundaries? Since when do parents need boundaries? Eric, I raised you. I have a say in this wedding, whether you like it or not. That's when Eric finally lost his patience. No, Mom, you don't. This is Lisa's and my wedding, not yours. And if you keep this up, you won't even be invited. Barbara's face went pale. You wouldn't dare. Try me, Eric said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but Barbara wasn't done yet. She started rallying Eric's extended family, spinning the story to make herself the victim. By the end of the week, we were fielding calls from aunts and cousins accusing us of disrespecting her and tearing the family apart. One aunt even said, she's just excited about the wedding. Can't you let her have this? I was done. Eric, we can't keep playing defense, I told him. She's not going to stop until we draw a hard line. Eric agreed, and we decided to cut contact with Barbara entirely until after the wedding. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. When Eric called to tell her, she cried, begged, and even threatened to never forgive him. But he stood his ground. Mom, this is what it's come to. If you can't respect us, you can't be part of our lives right now. She hung up on him again, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt quiet. The fallout was intense. Family members took sides, with some supporting us and others calling us ungrateful. But for the first time, Eric and I felt like we had control over our lives. We focused on planning the wedding our way, without interference. And while it wasn't easy to deal with the backlash, it was worth it. Barbara tried to reach out a few times, emails, texts, even a letter, but we didn't respond. We needed space, and we weren't going to let her guilt us into giving in. By the time the wedding day arrived, we'd managed to create the perfect celebration, one that was truly ours. And while Barbara wasn't there, I didn't feel her absence. I felt relief. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about reclaiming our lives and setting the tone for our future. Barbara's drama had dominated so much of our relationship. But now, we were finally free. Of course, I know this isn't the end of the story. Barbara isn't the type to give up easily. But for now, I'm holding on to the peace we've found and reminding myself that boundaries are a form of love, both for myself and for my relationship. The peace after the wedding didn't last long. At first, we thought Barbara had finally backed off, but within 2 weeks, the calls started again. Her voicemail swung between teary guilt-tripping and outright rage. You've destroyed this family, or all I ever wanted was to help. Eric deleted them before I could hear most of them, but the escalation didn't stop. One day, we received a handwritten letter. It wasn't an apology, it was an attack. Barbara accused me of isolating Eric, tearing him away from his family, and even hinted that she might challenge our marriage legally. She's completely lost it, Eric said, tossing the letter aside. Ignoring her seemed like the best option, but Barbara thrived on attention. When she realized we weren't engaging, she escalated further. One Saturday morning, she showed up at our house. I opened the door just enough to see her standing there with a stack of papers in her hand and that fake, sugary smile. "What do you want, Barbara?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "We need to talk," she said, trying to step inside. "This has gone on long enough." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, blocking her from entering. Her expression hardened. "Oh, I think there is," she said, thrusting the papers toward me. "Read this." It was a request for legal mediation. Barbara was trying to force us into a formal family dispute resolution. "Are you serious?" I snapped, flipping through the pages. "I'm protecting my family," she said as if this was the most rational thing in the world. Eric came up behind me, and when he saw the papers, his face went pale. "What is this?" Barbara held her ground. "You've let her destroy our family, Eric." "I'm not going to let it continue." Eric's tone was ice cold. "You destroyed it yourself, Mom. We've told you to stop interfering, and you've ignored us at every turn." Her voice rose, filled with indignation. "I'm your mother. You owe me respect, Eric." "No, Mom," he said firmly. "Respect is earned, and you've done nothing but cross boundaries. Leave now, or don't bother coming back." For a moment, she stood there, stunned. Then her face twisted with rage. "You will regret this, Eric," she said, her voice shaking. "Both of you will." She stormed off, slamming the gate behind her. We thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, Barbara showed up at Eric's workplace. She caused a scene at the reception desk, yelling that her son had been brainwashed and demanding to see him. Security had to escort her out. When Eric came home that evening, he looked utterly drained. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "She's completely out of control. We have to cut her off entirely," I said. "No more calls, no more visits. Nothing." It wasn't an easy decision, but we knew it was the only way to protect our sanity. We blocked her number, stopped responding to emails, and even changed the locks on our house. For a while, things were quiet. We started rebuilding, focusing on our marriage and trying to leave the chaos behind. But then, Barbara sent us a package. Inside was a single photo of Eric as a child, sitting on her lap, smiling. On the back, she had written, "You'll always be my son." Eric stared at the photo for a long time before finally setting it down. "She's trying to manipulate us," he said quietly. I nodded. We did what we had to do. For us. For the first time in months, I saw a sense of peace on his face. We haven't heard from Barbara since. Maybe she's finally given up, or maybe she's waiting to strike again. Either way, it doesn't matter. We've drawn the line, and we're standing by it. This isn't just about keeping Barbara out. It's about protecting our future. She no longer has the power to disrupt our lives. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it.